pastor tangibly. I heard about one church that the men's leadership team got together and they sort of all took a week during the summer. And so for like about 10 weeks during the summer, they made sure that the pastor's lawn got mowed every week. So the pastor didn't have to worry about that. It wasn't a big deal. Each guy did it once or twice during the course of the summer. I'm sure they got their teenage boys involved. Maybe you go out and buy a restaurant gift certificate for your pastor and get one of the teenagers in the church to babysit their kids so they can go out to a nice dinner sometime, just as a way of saying thank you. If you got a bunch of guys to throw in $5 or $10 each, you could do that very inexpensively for everyone, just as a way to say to your pastor, we love you, we support you, thank you, pastor, thank you for all the sacrifices that you make to be the pastor of this church. If you will support your pastor, you will make it much easier for your pastor to support your men's discipleship efforts. If you will show your pastor, for instance, through having an all-inclusive mindset, that you're not trying to create a whole nother church for them to be the pastor of, the rest of the church and then the men, because you're not scheduling all these activities there are already all these other activities in the church that men can't participate in, and now you're duplicating them with men's only activities. So if you have an all-inclusive mindset, that will show your pastor that you're supporting your pastor. We're going to talk about developing a vision and developing a way of communicating that vision. You want to make sure your pastor's on board with that vision, that actually your vision for discipling the men of your church is congruent with the pastor's vision for making disciples in the church. That the pastor sees you as a part of what they're doing instead of you having this grand master plan and you sort of saying, come on, pastor, keep up with us, right? You want to help your pastor lead effectively. And if you develop this reputation for your men's discipleship efforts as being supportive of the pastor and behind the pastor, then that will make it a lot easier for your pastor to support the efforts that you are undertaking. So that's your first strand, is to garner the support, the enthusiastic support and involvement of your senior pastor. Well, what's the second strand? Well, the second strand is that you need a passionate leader. You need somebody that wakes up in the morning and goes, man, how are we going to disciple the men of our church this week? If our church doesn't disciple men, I don't know what I'm going to do. This is the person that's sold out, heart, mind, and soul for seeing men discipled in the church. Now, if you don't have a person like this on your leadership team, you need to pray that God will bring someone to you, that He'll light a fire in somebody's heart and soul, that they will step up and just say, I'm the guy. I want to see all of our men discipled in my church. And the thing you have to do is don't look for the perfect guy. Don't look for the perfect leader, because guess what? Doesn't exist, right? So he may not be the most well-spoken person. He may not be even an upfront guy. But if he's somebody who's passionate about seeing the men of the church discipled, if he's got a vision for what the church would look like if all the men were growing spiritually, and he's willing to commit the time and energy to sort of corral the other leaders and help set you guys on a path together, then that's the man that you need to see as your leader. The other thing I want you to think about with your leader is it's not a lifetime appointment. You might have a leadership team and everybody's afraid to say, yeah, I'll lead the group this year, because they're afraid that once they raise their hand, somebody's going to prop it up and they're never going to be able to get it down again. And so look at the leadership role of your men's discipleship efforts as something that rotates. Always be thinking about who's the next guy going to be that's going to step in to this leadership role, and have a timetable or at least a process that you help guys transition into and out of that role. Because let me tell you, if you don't transition the leader effectively, then you'll have him until he burns out, and then you'll never have him again. But if you transition your leader effectively, he'll stick around. He'll be available with all the experience and knowledge, all the battles that have had to be fought, all the lessons that have had to be learned. Those will still remain accessible to you if you don't allow your leader to get burned out before he leaves that role. So what does a leader need then? The third strand is that he needs a committed leadership team. A passionate leader needs a committed leadership team. For a number of different reasons. One is that, remember what we said about your leader, there's no such thing as a perfect leader. So one of the things you need to think about is maybe you got a leader who's ultra detail oriented. He is great at making sure that all the P's and Q's are done, all the I's are dotted, all the T's are crossed, but he's not a great big vision guy. Well, then you want to have some guys on your leadership team that have some more vision and can help the ministry go in a certain direction rather than just sort of having really, really well-run events, which is what you might get with a super detail-oriented leader. Conversely, you might have a great leader who's super visionary. That's what we have in my church. We have actually a couple leaders who are super visionary, but they could not find a detail if it was nailed to their hand. So we have a couple other guys on our leadership team that are really, really good with details. And so we sort of sit around and we talk about what we want to accomplish in our men's discipleship efforts. Me and a couple other guys. And then we've got a couple of other guys that sit with us, and they're sort of waiting until we say, like, okay, go that way. And then, man, they're going to go get all the details taken care of. They're going to get the rooms reserved. They're going to get the calendar set. They're going to get the volunteers that are needed. They're going to do all the detail stuff. And I love it because I'm a vision, big picture guy. I don't like details. So I love it that I have a few guys that are so detail-oriented that they just love to sink their teeth in to making things run smoothly and effectively. And so you need all of this, all of these different skill sets on your leadership team. So what's your leadership team's purpose then? This is sort of the role they play, is to meet the different needs. Well, what's the purpose? Well, the first thing that your leadership team needs to do is they need to be committed to praying. They really need to spend some quantity of time together in prayer, because if your leadership team will spend time in prayer together, they will begin to become to each other what you're trying to model for the men of the church to become. But if all they're ever focused on is planning, then it just becomes an event committee. But when we start praying together and we start developing our relationships with each other, our relationships with God together as a group, and then we start to pray for the men of the church, and it arouses our passion. So now I don't just have one passionate leader on the leadership team. I got 6 or 8 guys that are, because the Holy Spirit speaks to them during their prayer times, now their hearts are aroused and they're even more passionate about seeing the men of the church discipled. The second thing they need to do is they need to be responsible for the vision. Where are you trying to take the men of your church? How do you communicate that out to all the men of your church? Your leaders need to be the spokesmen. They need to be the emissaries out into the rest of the church for what we're trying to accomplish in our men's discipleship efforts. And once they're in prayer together, they're communicating out the vision, then the next thing they need to do is they need to be planners. They need to be planners and organizers. But listen, not doers. They need to be planners and organizers, but not doers. If you have a men's ministry or a men's discipleship team where either a leader or a group of 5 or 6 leaders is doing all the work, you might as well quit now, because in 2 years you're going to be burned out and quit anyway. So the goal of a leadership team is to, again, model for the church what you want the men to become. So you don't want guys that just do everything. You want guys that go out and develop relationships with 3, 4, 5 other guys. And then when it's time to run that next activity they're involved in, that next small group effort that they want to do, or that Bible study, or that men's retreat, or that big wild beast feast barbecue that you're going to do, they've got a group of guys that they can say, hey, man, we're doing a wild beast feast in a month, and I'm responsible for the food. Could you come help me do the food? And so they get a guy, and one guy says, yeah, he'll do the shopping. And another guy says, yeah, I'll get some buddies and we'll do the setup. And another guy says, hey, I'll help you cook. And another guy says, yeah, I'll get some guys and we'll do the cleanup. Now, one guy who is responsible for the food, he could have done the shopping and he could have done the setup and the cooking and the cleanup. But that would have been, first of all, exhausting. And second of all, kind of a wasted opportunity. But instead, if I've got some guys that I can go to as a leader and say, hey, help me do this. Come alongside me and do this. Now I'm getting more guys involved in what's going on in the lives of the men of our church. I'm helping them capture the vision for what we're trying to accomplish, and I'm spending time with them. I'm feeding into their lives in the process.